Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the virtual platform for the 15th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD 15. And this is the inaugural event, the Global Commodities Forum, being hosted by the government and people of Barbados. My name is Winston Moore, and I am Professor of Economics and Deputy Principal of the University of the West Indies, Keely campus in Barbados. I will be one of your moderators over the first 2 days of the forum. The theme of the 2021 forum is strengthening resilience in commodity-dependent countries and is aimed at addressing the current challenges and the future opportunities for commodity-dependent economies. It's my pleasure to invite the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, to welcome you virtually to our lovely island.
On behalf of the government and people of Barbados, I extend a warm welcome to everyone who has joined us from around the world as we formally launched a virtual platform for the 15th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, otherwise known as UNCTAD 15. This inaugural event on the conference program, the Global Commodities Forum, has been long anticipated. We would very much have preferred, believe you me, for you to be here in person, but sadly, the seemingly unrelenting COVID-19 pandemic has prevented this. Thankfully, technology has enabled us to be together, to share ideas and to build our understanding across our world. It is an honor for Barbados to host UNCTAD 15, the first small island state to do so, and I say so proudly. And we thank the member states of UNCTAD for entrusting us with such an important responsibility. A special thanks to our Secretary General Rebecca Greenspan for her opening remarks, and to our friends Javier and Marco, the focal points in the UNCTAD Secretariat in Geneva, as well as our team here in Barbados, Peter and Carlos, for all of their efforts in organizing this forum. The COVID-19 pandemic and climate crisis are pointed reminders of how interconnected and interdependent we are in this world. Our fates are now so intertwined that whether you are a major superpower or a small island developing state such as my own country, there is no room for insular thinking. It is clear that no nation alone can win the battle against the challenges that face us, including this pandemic or the climate crisis, and that the smallest of nations have a role to play and can make that difference. At the 2002 inauguration of the United Nations House in Bridgetown, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, stated, and I quote, "The United Nations is an organization of states, equal states, large and small," unquote. We must focus on building robust partnerships based on understanding and the need for mutual respect, regardless of size, regardless of economic power, with a clear goal to do what is best for our global community. It is therefore appropriate that the theme for UNCTAD 15 is From Inequality and Vulnerability to Prosperity for All. It is also very appropriate that the first event of UNCTAD 15 is the Global Commodities Forum, which will speak to the issues of food security, water, and the transition to sustainable renewable energy under the theme Strengthening Resilience in Commodity-Dependent Countries. Our Caribbean small islands have a long history of trade, some of which has been a sad tale, regrettably, of exploitation, but also some of it has created a diverse, rich, multicultural society in our beautiful islands. Sugar and rum are an inextricable part of that history, with Barbados being the home to the world's oldest rum brand, and might I say to you, to the best rums in the world. Being commodity dependent has many facets, from the provision of affordable, nutritious food and clean water to access to affordable energy for homes and businesses. Small states are particularly vulnerable to the vagaries of international trade, susceptible to sudden increases in commodity prices, dependent on reliable daily arrival of ships and aircraft to meet the needs of our citizens, and exposed when there are supply shortages. The present COVID situation is no exception, with many developing countries facing shortages of vaccines, while others are holding supplies in excess of their needs. Barbados, while small, is doing its part. We recognize that a thriving and productive agricultural sector is important to national food security and is vital to the economic and social development of our country. Energy security is also a crucial element of our strategy. For over 40 years, we have exploited the boundless energy from the sun for solar hot water heaters installed on our roofs across many homes and across many businesses. We have now set a goal for 100% of our electricity to be supplied by renewable energy by 2030. We've already made significant strides towards this goal, and at the same time, we have begun the journey to transform our transport sector by facilitating the growth in electric vehicles. These initiatives will move us away from the dependence on fossil fuel and will help us to combat the climate crisis. This matters to us, as small island states are among the most vulnerable to climate change, with Barbados and our Caribbean neighbours experiencing the ravages of more frequent and severe hurricanes. And of course, we experience the difficulties of the groundwater crisis and the sargassum. It is my belief that every country must punch above its weight to address the urgent challenges and to correct the imbalances for a brighter future for all of the citizens of the world. This is not a time for division, but a time for solidarity, for finding common ground. My sincere hope is that the things that unite us, that bring us closer together, will shape the outcomes of this forum, and that the statements and declarations you produce will be a rallying cry for action by the representatives of the member states at the ministerial conference. It is our time to make that difference. Best wishes, my friends, to all of you. For those who have not come to Barbados, you owe us a visit. We look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
I now hand you over to my fellow moderator from Bridgetown to Geneva, Ms. Maggie Mutesi, to introduce the Secretary General of UNCTAD, Ms. Rebecca Greenspan, and our guest in the studio in Geneva.
Thank you very much, Winston. Clearly, so much has changed. I just had everyone clap, and for a moment I was thinking, it felt like she was in this room with us today. And again, it reminded us of the fact that we need to be resilient and move with the times. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our attendees joining us from all around the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's my absolute huge pleasure and privilege to be hosting this inaugural conference on global commodities live from the prestigious and amazing, beautiful Palais des Nations here in Geneva with my co-host Winston in Barbados. We're going to be all over the world. We'll be taking questions from different countries. So we can say we are virtual, but we are also physical in Geneva. I am an international journalist. My name is Maggie Mutesi, but I'm also a media entrepreneur, founder, and managing editor of Mansa Media. And for me, this conference hits back home. As we all know that the coronavirus has in every way disrupted lives, from the basic things like a handshake to how we eat or even interact. It's the same thing in Africa, where we've felt actually the impact economically due to restrictions that have caused lockdowns, but also a standstill in logistics, and of course a standstill in the global supply chains. And everything around us is changing in this very moment. But also where there's disruption lies an opportunity. And this is where conferences or conversations like these are so important, that we come together to find, common solutions to better the future. Let's look at this event as an exploration of old and new ideas, also considering that it's the first event we're having on global commodities. We hope to have others, but we hope that our ideas and experiences can help us to collectively reimagine a new future of international trade, a new future of partnerships, a new future of working together, and of course, a new UNCTAD itself as we face the global pandemic. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite everyone to join me in a virtually, maybe you can do a hand clap, whatever you would wish to do in welcoming the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. On my immediate right, Miss Rebecca Grenspan, who is also, by the way, having her first day here at UNCTAD. Miss Rebecca, what a wonderful start.
Thank you very much, Margot, and let me greet Excellency Prime Minister Motley. Dear Mia, thank you so much for your remarkable speech and your call for robust partnerships and mutual respect. This is a time for solidarity, did Mia told us. So thank you so much for your words and for your leadership in the road to UNCTAD 15. As you said, the first time that that sixth country holds such a conference, so a remarkable achievement. I want to also greet the Excellency Ambassador of Barbados and the distinguished delegates that are here with us. Ambassador, thank you very much for being with us now. Dear colleagues from UNCTAD and official partners of the Global Commodities Forum, let me also say hello to Isabel Duran, the DSG of UNCTAD. Isabel, thank you so much for all your leadership during these 7 months that you have been heading the organization. Thank you so much. And dear Teresa, also the acting director for the Trade Division, thank you so much for all the work that has gone in the Global Commodities Forum. So, dear friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this 9th edition of the Global Commodity Forum, the first of the 5 forums that lead to UNCTAD 15, the 15th session of our conference, which will be held this 3rd to 7th of October, semi-remotely, as Mia said, here in Geneva and in Barbados. I bid you all welcome in this, as you know, and as Margot said, my first day at the job as Secretary General of UNCTAD. So please let me share with you how excited I am to be here among you, opening this important forum. In a way, you should be greeting me also, no? For my first days. It is a very fortunate coincidence that my first official duty at UNCTAD is related to commodities. The subject of commodities, their potential, and their related issues are central to the work UNCTAD has done since its founding in 1964 and are a hallmark of our contribution to the multilateral system and the developing world. As a Latin American economist, this is a subject I have followed all my life, a quest for which I have always relied on UNCTAD's quality research. It is thus a double honor to host all of you today. Dear friends, I must share a word of thanks to our co-organizers of this event, the government of Barbados in first place, as well as to our official partners, with whom none of this could have been possible. The Common Fund for Commodities, the Global Gas Center, the Intergovernmental Forum of Mining, Minerals, Metals and Sustainable Development, IGF, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the Commonwealth, and the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. Launched in 2010, the Global Commodity Forum provides a high-level, neutral, multi-stakeholder platform to discuss issues related to the production and trade of commodities with a focus on developing countries. The GCF was created to represent an all-embracing approach to resolving issues of common global concern. The aim is to forge a consensus around ways of dealing with a gamut of commodity-related problems and their effects on commodity-dependent developing countries. This forum is a place where developing countries can debate among equals about issues of particular interest to them. The issue of commodity dependence has always attracted interest in view of the importance of commodities trade for developing countries. and the opportunities and challenges associated with it. The nominal value of world commodity exports increased 20% by 2019 compared with 2009, only in 10 years. According to UNCTAD State of Commodity Dependence 2021 report released on September 8th. This can be seen as good news. However, dependence on commodities has also increased globally over the last decade, affecting now 101 countries, an increase from 93 in 2009. So more and more countries are now dependent or have commodity dependence today. And commodity dependence, as you know, is associated with challenges such as slow long-term growth, an undiversified economic structure, income volatility, and macroeconomic instability, the Dutch disease, political instability and poor governance, illicit financial flows, as well as high exposure to shocks, including those resulting from climate change and pandemic, such as the coronavirus disease of 2019. And we all know that when we have volatility in our countries and when we have shocks, there is an asymmetry because poverty and inequality rise very fast during the crisis, but they recover very slowly in the upturn. So we are always in this vicious cycle of more poverty and inequality with volatility, with macroeconomic instability, and also with the exposure to shocks. So in fact, the correlation between commodity prices and economic growth in developing countries may be as high as 70%, illustrating the strong link between commodity dependence and economic performance. More recently, UNCTAD work on commodities has shown light on global issues such as the challenges of climate change, mitigation, and adaptation for commodity-dependent developing countries, and the devastating effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on international trade, including commodities trade. The UNCTAD Free Market Commodity Price Index for all commodity groups was down by almost 36% as a result of the economic contraction driven by the pandemic. And this happened only between January and April 2020. In 4 months, we had a downturn in the price index of 36%. This downturn trend reversed after April. And by July, the index doubled its value. So you can see the volatility that these countries are submitted to because of their commodity dependence. Now, also the other side of this story shows that even though commodity exporters may have benefited from this price increase from May 2020 to July 21, food importing countries have not, particularly the most vulnerable ones that have suffered a 41% increase in food prices, making food security even more challenging. 41% increase in food prices. Most particularly hurt have been small island developing states, as Mia said, relying on tourism for foreign exchange used to import food from international markets. Indeed, revenues from tourism dwindled, reducing these countries' ability to meet their food needs. In my lifetime, I have witnessed many commodity cycles firsthand and have seen both its rapid upswings and distressing downturns. To be commodity rich, we know, is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, gives countries the possibility to use it wisely when allows for economic diversification that manage the volatility and the risk that it entails, and using it in the benefit of the people's well-being. But often, and we know that, it is too heavy to handle and often wielded by powers outside our control. The trap of commodity dependence, however, can be and has been escaped. From 1950 to 1954, coffee and bananas accounted for 88% of the exports of my country, Costa Rica. We were then one of the poorest countries in Latin America. So coffee and bananas were 88% of total exports in my country during those years. Today, these two commodities represent only 11% of our total exports, less than half than our now main export, that is medical instruments. This change happened in my lifetime, and it is important that we consider it. Challenges are numerous and are different from country to country, but we must never lose the sight of that feasibility. It is not a destiny we need to accept. For example, a recent report by UNCTAD highlights the potential for harnessing technology and innovation to enable commodity-dependent countries to escape from their dependence trap. Dear friends, the theme of the 2021 forum is strengthening resilience in commodity-dependent countries. The topic of resilience is timely, given the historic amount of global shocks we have experienced in recent years, which have particularly harmed commodity-dependent developing countries. A shock often overlooked is what happened to the transport costs. We know commodities trade could not happen without maritime transport. More than 80% of global trade volumes are seaborne, and ports and shipping are currently confronted with unprecedented challenges due to COVID-19 pandemic. Ports are congested, waiting times have surged, and freight rates have reached historically high levels. This weekend, container freight rates reached another historical record. To move a standard container from Shanghai to Santos today cost $10,148, 6 times higher than the average over the previous decade, and more than double its previous peak. The Baltic Dry Index, a key measure of dry commodities transport, reached more than 4,000 points end of August, twice the long-term average, higher than any time during the last decade. But it is not only the high shipping costs that affect commodity trade and prices. Schedule reliability is historically low, and long delays in ports also affect commodities, trades, and prices. The medium-term perspective for shipping costs and options are not encouraging. UNCTAD's research shows that the shipping cycle, trends in consolidation of the industry, and the expected cost of the decarbonization will all impede that freight rates return to previous levels for quite some time. UNCTAD is supporting member countries to keep supply chains resilient through our support to trade facilitation, automation, and digitalization. We monitor trends in competition and build up capacities of national competition authorities. We collaborate with international partners in the assessment of the impact of decarbonization measures in shipping, and we strengthen the capacity of ports to remain resilient in times of the pandemic. In this light, the need for increasing resilience of commodity-dependent developing countries cannot be overemphasized. All countries are facing unprecedented challenges that transcend national boundaries. The vital signs of our planet are showing severe strain with climate change at the forefront. At the same time, millions still lack access to electricity, water supply, and good sanitation, mostly in rural areas of the developing world, while the demand for food is projected to increase by 60% as the world population approaches 10 billion by 2050. I am afraid that these global shocks will most likely continue, forcing us to push more forcefully for resilience and preparedness agenda. In a word, we must not be shocked by shocks any longer. The forum is organized, as the Prime Minister of Barbados said, in 4 thematic sessions covering crucial dimensions of resilience in commodity-dependent countries, and at the end, a high-level policy roundtable. The first session will be dedicated to agriculture with a focus on food security and the necessary policy actions to attain and/or preserve it. The second session will examine challenges related to access to water in the 21st century. The third and fourth sessions will take place tomorrow and will examine issues related to energy commodities and minerals with a focus on energy transition. The forum will conclude then in the day 3 with a high-level roundtable discussion on the theme of the forum. We expect this discussion to help provide some answers to the burning questions associated with the issues I have just highlighted and chart the way for UNCTAD's future work over the next 4 years. The panels will bring together experts, policymakers, and high-level political and institutional representatives from all regions of the world, from the public and private sectors, as well as from academia and in civil society. So we have to answer the following questions. What should net food importing developing countries do to increase their resilience for international commodity market price shocks? Many fuel-dependent countries will see their assets stranded as a result of the decarbonization of the global economy. How should these countries prepare for this dramatic change? Countries dependent on minerals needed to fuel the transition to greener sources of energy, such as cobalt, lithium, manganese, copper, nickel, aluminum, and others are expected to experience booming demand for their commodities. How should they respond to ensure that expansion of mining activities and that it will not harm the environment, that we respect human rights, and generate revenues that will benefit all citizens? Dear friends, the COVID-19 crisis has seriously compromised the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and other long-term development objectives in many emerging countries, pointing to the need of accelerating the transition to a new and reinforced multilateral system, more horizontal, more committed, more South-focused. There can be no resilience without international cooperation, and that undeniable fact should accompany us in our discussions in the days ahead. I wish you all a fruitful forum, full of interesting debates and valuable lessons and policies, because much hinges on these discussions, which are key stepping stones towards UNCTAD 15 next month, whose theme, From Inequality and Vulnerability to Prosperity for All, is today, my dear friends, more urgent than ever. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rebecca, for the opening remarks. And indeed, there is no better time to talk about resilience than now, when the world has been brought to its knees. Like I said, we are live in Barbados and Geneva, so we will jump right into the conversations in Barbados. Back to you, Winston.
Welcome back to our studio here in Barbados for the first of 4 panel discussions to take place over the next 2 days. As a researcher into issues of national development, including the green economy, as well as the economic impact of climate change, I'm excited to be part of the discussions that will take place over the next 3 days that will address matters relating to food security, sustainable water use, and the transition to renewable energy. There will be a question and answer session at the end of each panel discussion. Questions will be taken from the audience in Geneva, and if you're following along online and wish to ask a question, please use the Slido link on the conference platform. You will see the Slido icon in the auditorium next to the main screen. The United Nations has set ending hunger, achieving food security and improved nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture as the second of its 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved by the year 2030. It's therefore fitting that today's first panel discussion will explore the challenges and opportunities for food security and smart agriculture. We have gathered a group of distinguished persons from around the world, including colleagues from Barbados and across the Caribbean. My introductions of each of the panelists will be brief, and I encourage you to visit the UNCTAD website to view their full and comprehensive bios. Our first presentation is from Mr. Arnaud Petit, Director, International Grain Council, IGC. IGC is an intergovernmental organization that offers independent analysis on grains, oilseeds, and rice markets to its member governments to promote international trade in grains. Mr. Petit has worked at the European Farmers and Agricultural Cooperatives Union as Director for Commodities and Trade, and was also a member of the Executive Committee of the European Technology Platform, Plants for the Future. I now invite Mr. Petit to speak.
Good day to everyone, and thank you very much for granting the opportunity for International Grains Council to take part to this conference. And let me also congratulate Barbados authorities to organize and to host this event. First of all, just to get a few idea of what we are doing in terms of activities of IGC, and please the next slide. IGC is providing market information transparency on all cereals, oilseed and rice, as you mentioned. And soon in November, we will start also to include legumes and pulses in our portfolio of activities, because some staple foods are not necessarily represented in the global trade information. So this is why we will continue to work on this. And you can see in the slide different activities which are provided for free or in the subscription, and particularly a topic which has been mentioned by the Secretary General of UNCTAD, the freight market. We have now a modeling for more than 430 routes which provide detailed information about the different components of freight, and definitely it's a very big matter at the moment. Next slide, please. Looking forward about supply of grains to the global supply and demand, I would say in the last decade, more or less 500 million tons of grains, oilseed and rice has been added to this global supply, an increase of 22%. So definitively an improvement in yield and efficiency of agriculture, when the need of further area of acreage has increased by only 6%. So definitively, smart agriculture is a tool for farmers, and particularly in developed countries, in order to improve their efficiency, but also to respond to some societal demand, as it has been mentioned about climate change, decarbonization. But if we look now in the next slide, please, I would like to highlight about a few topics where smart agriculture should not be linked only to developed countries, but also for developing countries, and particularly not to look specifically on the field, but on the value chain. And I think here the smart agriculture will scale up benefits for all the society if we can integrate the smart farming in the value chain development. Here you have some graph about wheat. We just published some forecast 5 years projection for the wheat. And first of all, you have to look that for 25-26, still the production would match the consumption. So in terms of figures and global figures, there is no shortage about wheat. The question is, when you look about consumption continuing to grow, it's consumption for food, meaning we need a wheat with specific quality for food. And there, smart agriculture can provide some tools to improve the quality of production at farm level, is it in a developing country or developed countries. And for that, I would say to improve the efficiency of smart agriculture, particularly in developing countries, we need some data to feed the model, and then for smart agriculture to provide useful information. And here is maybe one of the gaps we need to fill is how to ensure that developing countries can feed data to this smart agriculture in order to use the benefit of this tool. In terms of trade, we don't see a tremendous increase, but I would say mainly the trade would improve in Southeast Asia and in Sub-Saharan Africa due to the main driver, which stays demographic growth. So definitively a wheat matter of continuing the improvement of yields and also improving the quality of what we are producing is very important. Next slide, please. Second point about second market, maize. As you can see on maize, it's mainly the trade will be the main drivers in the future. We would continue to keep a very dynamic global trade on maize by 2%, and mainly for feed demand, so meaning feeding livestock sector in developing countries. Here, I would say how smart agriculture can provide benefits for developing countries. I would say mainly if developing countries can benefit from digitalization of trade. It is a facilitator of trade, definitively, but it could help also the developing country to edge the position relating to market. What we have seen in the current pandemic, indeed, the supply has not been impacted by COVID. We have not seen a decrease of production, but all the logistic has been modified, disrupt in one way, linked to the COVID or second impact of the COVID. And that's something we really need to look for commodities which rely on maize to feed the livestock, is how digitization can link to the smart farming. In that way, developing countries could edge or anticipate the market position and alleviate some volatility on the grains market. Next slide, please. Third, very relevant commodities in terms of food feed is soybean. I say food feed for soybean because we have to bear in mind that, first of all, soybean is produced for the main purpose of edible oil, first of all, for food mainly, and then soybean is going to feed the livestock sector. And here again, very important is to look that the world demand of soybean will continue to increase, and mainly, as you can see in China, China is really the big player in terms of soybean, but you have other countries as Southeast Asia and also Sub-Saharan Africa in another end, which is also a very dynamic market and where we could expect some growth in terms of demand. Therefore, the export will continue to improve. And again, here we are back about the matter of digitization of trade, particularly on soybean and edible oil, how the countries and developing countries can develop a very efficient tool to trade. And if we are able to have farming agriculture communicating more easily, more in advance to the market information about what would be planted, what would be harvested, and which type of quality, that means you can help developing countries also to manage the risk relating to the market. And there, it's really the question of connection of information. And the third point is, if you have smart farming working in your country, it means also it helps to structure the domestic market. And if you have a domestic market well organized, that means you can expect to have investment from the grain value chain in your country. And that's the last point I would like to really highlight about smart agriculture and developing countries is also there is a possibility to develop production in your country, processing in your country, and definitively having smart agriculture another tool which would help to structure your market, your domestic market, and I would say provide information to your investors. I would like really to thank you for your attention, and I will be very pleased to answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Mr. Petit. The benefits of smart agriculture seem to be quite useful as developing countries adapt to the effects of climate change. Thank you very much again. We now turn to two specialists from the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, the agency of the United Nations that leads international efforts to defeat hunger. Mrs. Verman Extavor is the Regional Project Coordinator for the Caribbean for the FAO, and Mr. Roberto Sandoval, Emergency Focal Point and Disaster Risk Management Specialist. I now invite both of them to make their presentations.
Good morning, good day, and greetings, colleagues. Greetings from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And on behalf of the Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean, Dr. Renata Clark, we at FAO are pleased to join you, our panelists today and UN partners, and all distinguished guests at this forum today. We are certainly pleased that the Forum for UNCTAD 15 is kicking off with a discussion on food security and its linkages to smart agriculture. All protocols having been observed, my colleague Roberto Sandoval and myself will share with you actions and activities that we at FAO in the Caribbean are working on to improve and integrate digital solutions into the agricultural sector towards meeting food security needs and by extension, supporting the meeting of the Sustainable Development Goals. So to start, we just take a quick snapshot and just to remind us of what it is to do ease of doing business in the Caribbean as ranked by the World Bank. Generally reminding us that we're really, and as articulated earlier, that we're really still driven by tourism versus agriculture, and that we are continuously faced by our vulnerability to climate change and natural disasters, and continuously have significant death being built up due to the passage of natural disasters, and now added to it, this global pandemic, COVID-19. Recognizing how important it is, reminding us, how important it is for us in the region to be competitiveness, understanding that competitiveness as measured by the ease of doing business has reflected a sharp decline for us within the region from 2009 to 2019, and a further decline in 2020 and 2021. Notwithstanding, we see the importance of innovation and technology as key drivers for growth and for us meeting our competitiveness and growing and improving on our competitive edge. Next, within the last 2 decades in the region, we have certainly improved on our use and uptake of ICTs and the internet across the Caribbean region, as reported by my partner entity, the ITU. Critical to one of the things we've seen is an insignificant increase in mobile subscriptions, one of the key indicators, as well as an increase in fixed and broadband use. Notably, many of our small island development states have improved access to the internet and broadband subscription availability. Key to this data in recent times is the reflection on youth who have had increased access and use of the internet as measured by our indicators. And notably that as we seek to assess the gender gap, women are reportedly accessing the internet more than men, and puts us quite comparative to world use amongst the two genders in ICTs. At this point, I'm going to take a pause as we take a look at our direct applications of ICTs in the agricultural sector and introduce to you and bring to the floor my colleague Roberto to share with you at the sectorial level our use of digital solutions in the Caribbean. Roberto? Sorry, Roberto, you're on mute. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
No. Yes, you can hear him? Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. So examples of ongoing digital CSA work in the Caribbean. So we have, for example, in Dominica, which includes the support to the establishment of drone and mapping, agriculture mapping and drone teams. This includes support to capacity building and providing some support to operationalization of these teams, including some hardware support. You can see from photo on the slide, a pilot mapping mission in Dominica, uh, where we were able to map in high resolution one of the most vulnerable upland communities in there. So basically, these technologies uh, are expected to help transform how extension officers and field experts within the Ministry of Agriculture uh, do their work, getting access to information in a more faster and more reliable manner. So in the next slide, we have additional examples of digital CSA technologies. So meant primarily to support at scale disaster risk forecasting. So this includes the development of a crop disease model, risk model for Black Sigatoka, the development of a precision irrigation model, since we do know that a lot of the countries in the Caribbean are actually highly water stressed. And we are also supporting Caribbean-wide inventory of data sets that can be highly relevant and useful for the agriculture sector, so as to reduce the burden that other ministries, for example, have to do or have to take on as they sift through the millions of terabytes of information that's available. So now I hand over back to my colleague Vermaran. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto, and just giving us an overview of what it looks like sectorally. But when we take a closer look at digitization and what it means for us in the sector, it really brings us home to recognizing in order to transform Caribbean food systems to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, it's really possible with strong collaboration with the private sector and driven by data, market-based innovations, and facilitating access to markets and investments along the value chain, including research and development of new and innovative products, the application of the digital solutions, linking with the private sector for us has been weak and underexploited in the past, as we've generally been seen as providers and buyers in a provider-buyer relationship. Our new partnerships are required to allow us to fully tap the potential of public-private sector partnerships to drive the value chains and drive them from a market-driven perspective with evidence and data to inform us on meeting industry and market requirements. We have begun this process by taking a look and using tools that support the countries in developing and identifying high value chains for potential industry development, and also conducting rapid analysis of value chains to ensure that we are using market-driven, evidence-based approaches to support investment and scaling up. These tools bring us clear focus on all the chain stakeholders, from input suppliers to consumers, allowing us to identify key constraints and as well as the leverage points in value chains, and analyzing it in collaboration with the private sector to understand our cost of production and develop business models, resulting in upgrading strategies to feature key public-private sector partnerships along the chain. Next, in terms of some of these key applications, we have seen by using a selection tool for value chain selection, and we prioritize and focus on data and evidence of identified chains in countries in the Caribbean, they're able to prioritize and focus on the development of those value chains. By conducting rapid analysis in Belize, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, we have seen the ability of the Ministry of Agriculture and their team to understand the utilization of value chain principles and practices, to analyze priority chains, and to develop key upgrading strategies in response to market demands and needs. And this has successfully been done in these countries. We continue at FAO to apply digital solutions by introducing an animal identification and traceability platform in Suriname, which is currently being piloted to allow us to trace and begin to trace our meat products through the value chains from the beginning to the end. And this work is currently being expanded into 4 other Caribbean countries. We have also integrated and collaborated with the private sector to introduce traceability systems in the fisheries subsector, namely specifically in Grenada for the tuna fish trade, which enters the export market, and the lobster trade in Belize, using digital traceability systems to do regulation, certification, and branding, which improves cost, efficiencies, control, and compliance requirements. As we continue to work in the use and application of digital solutions, in Belize, we've also implemented and piloted the spatial monitoring and reporting tool for fisheries vessels as part of the reporting of the global reporting of to regulate the fisheries industry within the region. Just to name a few of some of the things where we're beginning to introduce and work with the countries to apply digital solutions towards their value chains. To bring it all together, we recognize that digital technologies still require an environment that is needed to function with policy level support. Next. And to this end, we have been partnering with CARICOM and national governments to begin the development of e-agricultural strategies in selected countries. To this end, we will be able to see a framework established on the use of digital solutions and to harmonize the use of those solutions and its access by our smallholders to get information in a timely manner that is of quality and high value to inform production practices as well as meet market requirements. And part of this is where we create the database of best practices on the use of these digital solutions. Our Director General has launched an initiative, 1,000 Villages, which has also created the opportunity for us to link farmers and fishers to rural tourism markets, bringing closer and closing the gap between agriculture and tourism to allow our farmers and fisher folk to provide their inputs directly to the tourism market. Through this initiative, we are using technology and training farmers in digital literacy, digital marketing, and digital sales in order to link and meet with the market requirements in their rural communities. As a further extension and on upcoming work, we are establishing e-agricultural hubs in 2 countries that will be driven by data to link smallholder farmers and the private sector with agricultural information to facilitate trade and market development. This will be seen within the Caribbean region in the coming months, beginning in the coming months. Our partnership through South-South cooperation with China also sets the policy framework, also allows us to develop policy frameworks and support knowledge sharing and exchange, which are critical in the application of new technologies and creating opportunities for innovation. Next. This brings me, colleagues, to the end of my presentation and my colleagues' presentation. And before I leave, I want to share with you a quote from one of my own colleagues, that meeting the challenges facing the agri-food and non-agri-food systems means dealing with the complexity of working in an integrated manner so that proposed solutions are fit for both problems they address and the main objectives that we are seeking to pursue by the system as a whole. With this in mind, we keep transforming our food systems and seeking to find new and innovative ways to apply digital solutions to meet our food security needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Extavor and Mr. Sandoval. I think the key takeaways that I had from that presentation was that growth and innovation are largely driven by technology, but that the effects of technology, or that technology can actually help small stakes offset the risks associated with their development challenges. It's now time to introduce the first of our panelists here in the studio. Ms. Keely Holder, Chief Agricultural Officer, Barbados Ministry of Agriculture, is the first female and youngest ever Chief Agricultural Officer. Ms. Holder is a graduate of the University of the West Indies and also holds a postgraduate diploma in crop production and water management from Galilee Institute. Ms. Holder has a wide background in agriculture, including experience in both the private and public sectors. Ms. Holder, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. Greetings from Barbados' Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. I would like to welcome everyone to this forum. Unfortunately, you're not here to join us in sunny Barbados, but we hope that we will see you at some point in the future. As it relates to food security and specifically smart agriculture, I think one of the things that we want to do is to contextualize where is the world going in terms of food as well as agriculture. And we see three specific areas where there are major mega trends that are coinciding. Firstly, we see that we're in a changing climate. Nature is changing. We also see that as it relates to people desires for food and the types of food, that's also changing. And lastly, what we're seeing is that how nature is interacting with people through the use of technology, what we're experiencing now, is also changing. And so those three things are coinciding in a fantastic way, and that is what is driving our smart agriculture. Now, of course, we have to realize that when we talk about commodities, and specifically when we talk about agriculture, that agriculture plays several roles as it relates to social and economic development. We know that they're key for the SDG goals 1 and 2, and specifically, agriculture is a basis for subsistence. It plays a role with regard to contributing to economic development. It has a role in positive youth development. It's a role in innovation in particular, and driving innovation within the world. And it also contributes to the balance of payments. It is a wholesome activity. And so there are a number of roles that we see that agriculture is playing. And so then when we start to drill down on how we want to address food security, and specifically agriculture, we want to tie in then those things together, because we understand that it is a socioeconomic role that agriculture must play, and being able to support that, that is what the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security in Barbados is here to do. So given this, what we want to look at, and as we move into the future, we are looking now at how we're going to imply a number of smart agricultural technologies. So smart agriculture is not just the use of digital technology, but really and truly, we're building on all of the agricultural revolutions that have gone before the first. We've seen the second revolution with the use of machinery, the third one built on it as it relates to biotechnology, biopesticides, as it related to the use of irrigation and other types of equipment. And now we're seeing smart agriculture with innovation and a digital framework building on each one of those things. And so in our efforts to transform Barbadian agriculture, to take our nation forward, to ensure that we have security for our people as it relates to food, we have to ensure then that we have enough of the older technologies to build on to be able to benefit significantly and sufficiently from the smart agricultural revolution that we want to drive in Barbados. Now, as it relates specifically to the smart agricultural technologies we've already started to adopt in Barbados to drive our agriculture and drive the commodities that we are growing here, one of which would be sugar. There are a number of initiatives that we have started. Firstly, we are doing GIS mapping of all of our soils in Barbados, and this is in collaboration with the Kingdom of Morocco. And that would allow us then to move to the next level, which would allow for GPS mapping, soil sensing, and have more precise information as to what is going on in our soils at any given time. Building on that, we are also working with the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology and the 5 Cs that's based in Belize. And we are working with those agencies to provide a new framework from which we start to track pests and disease using agrometeorology, because there is a link between where the weather, our temperatures surrounding a particular climate, and when you get pest or disease outbreaks. So we have now started this wonderful work where we're now going to be able to provide farmers with more real-time information as to when they would be able to get an outbreak, of a particular pest or a particular disease, and we would be able then to provide information to guide them on exactly how they should handle such a pest outbreak. This gives us greater, or give farmers greater specificity and control within their environment, and not be reactive, but be proactive in their approach to handling pests and disease, and ensuring that they get the highest use possible, because they now know the most precise ways in which to deal with it. Thirdly, we are working with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture. We have plans to set up an innovation lab, which will allow us to do 3D printing of agricultural equipment and come up with new designs that are suitable in a small-scale environment. This is going to expand our reach of the things that we can do. We know that we're in an era where, building on the machinery and the precision machinery, there's now robotics and greater amount of automation. And so with that work, it would give us that scope to be able to do that. Fourth, we are also looking to set up a display center, which would display what are the top smart agricultural solutions, digital solutions around the world, so that our young people are able to engage, and we're able to engage them and give them an opportunity to observe and trial world class. Even though they may not be exposed to it currently here in Barbados, we can now bring the world to them using the same digital technologies, and this would then create the framework to get greater participation for youth in agriculture. Lastly, we're also looking at how we can utilize drone technology. Drone technology not only for surveillance, but currently we are aware that there is technology using drones where you can determine how sweet a particular crop is in the field. We would be looking to utilize that. How can we do an assessment as to what products we have growing on island within the country at any given time? What is the yield likely to be? How could we then use it as well to identify pest and disease problems? How we could use it as well to identify disaster areas and what has been the impact. And this is also an area where we're looking to develop further applications where farmers can send us information directly when there is a disaster, so that we can get real-time information, what's happening on the ground with the farmers, how quickly can we respond, how quickly can we get them back up and running again, because we understand that, well, the climate, we can't control it per se. We are able to predict it better, manage our response to it, and the quickness with which we can recover from a disaster event. So these are key areas within the Barbadian context that we are starting already to look at digital technologies and digital applications to be able to move our farmers to the next level, to respond to food and nutrition security, be able to respond to food safety as well. Blockchain technology is another area which we are investigating, so that there's traceability from the farm to the fork, and this is going to be critical because we are now in the process of implementing new sanitary and phytosanitary legislation that will speak to the areas of food safety, and this now will support this work as well. So there's quite a huge amount of work that we started in Barbados, and in the coming years we expect this to expand, and we expect this to improve the livelihood of farmers, expect this to improve our ability to supply the commodities that our country needs to be able to ensure our food and nutrition security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holder. I think the two takeaways that I took from that presentation was, first, agriculture has a socio-economic role. I think sometimes you sort of forget that. But also the specific examples that we're using in Barbados in relation to smart agriculture and practice, and how we're working with our international and regional donors. And this is something that small economies definitely need to do more of in the future. So thank you very much. Our final presentation is from Mrs. Ina Harvey, Barbados representative of the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, ICA. Mrs. Harvey is also ICA's lead specialist in agritourism, providing support for the development and implementation of regional and hemispheric programs to promote agro-tourism linkages and rural tourism in the Caribbean and Latin America. I now invite Mrs. Harvey to make her presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. And good morning, good afternoon, buenos dias, bonjour. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be a part of UNCTAD 15 in this Global Commodities Forum. I bring you greetings from our Director General, Dr. Manuel Otero, and from the ICA delegation here in Barbados. Next slide. The challenges for Caribbean agriculture are great, as you have heard. And the COVID impact on Caribbean agriculture has been tremendous. Local food systems, rural communities have been hard hit, experiencing food supply chain disruptions, higher freight costs. You heard Secretary General Greenspan speak about the freight costs, job layoffs, especially because we're so dependent on tourism, and price inflation in inputs and supplies right across the Caribbean. ICA's mandate to promote and sustain livelihoods, especially in rural communities, is very significant right across the Caribbean region. Next slide. And in response, we have been focusing on innovation and technology. I'm happy that Keely mentioned innovations from first, second, third generation up to 4.0 now. And we see that the Internet of Things, may I have the next slide, please? The Internet of Things provides a whole lot of opportunities for Caribbean agriculture, innovation, and technology. You've heard a lot about drone applications from the FAO representatives, soil management. At ICA, we're focusing on healthy soils, and water management. The Caribbean, and especially Barbados, is highly water scarce. Livestock management, precision farming, all of these are opportunities for digital applications and innovation and technology in our agriculture. And as you see, the smart agriculture market is expected to reach 18.45 billion in 2022 with a compound annual growth rate of 13.8%. So we're in the right forum. Next slide, please. ICA's response has been focused on innovation and technology because we see this as the future for agriculture and for maintaining food security, especially in the Caribbean region, where our food import bill is in the billions. At ICA's headquarters in Costa Rica, we have established an interpretation center showing what the tomorrow of agriculture is going to be. It's called CIMAG, and it's an ambitious educational project at the service of the member countries. And we have 34 member countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. CIMAG seeks to highlight the fundamental role of new technologies in the agricultural sector and its impact on the well-being of families living in rural and urban areas through a virtual educational space. And this is what Keely mentioned. And we hope to bring this CIMAG model not only to Barbados, but to other countries in the Caribbean so that we lift the entire Caribbean with respect to innovation and technology and digital applications. Next slide, please. I just want to give you some examples of what ICA has been doing in 2020, especially with the COVID response. Applying science and innovation in traditional crop production, banana production in Grenada, in Dominica, in St. Lucia to improve productivity, manage disease, enhance nutrient density. We also have a biofortification network with a number of partners across the world. And we are doing biofortification of varieties of rice, zinc fortification. As you know, zinc is an essential micronutrient for health. And iron fortification in red beans and black beans. And these trials are being done in Guyana and the bean trials in Belize. And in Guyana, they've already started to harvest the rice. So this biofortification project is a CARICOM-approved project that we're hoping to help to promote the food and nutrition security, especially in these staples, rice and peas, peas and rice. Those are essential foods for us in the Caribbean. Next slide, please. Another area in which we're applying innovation and technology is in livestock health. And our agricultural health and food safety program in ICA is one of our flagship programs. We operate at the hemispheric level, at regional and at national levels. And in Jamaica, we are strengthening our livestock production through antimicrobial resistance. Livestock genetics are being used, and we are improving capacities here in Barbados with the famous Barbados black-belly sheep to address all the emerging crises and to build up that critical mass so that we have enough sheep and livestock across the region to fulfill our protein food security needs. Next. Another area of innovation and technology is the development of apps. And in our St. Lucia office, we're working with a group of young men who have created something called the Guru Marketplace. As you know, when farmers and other providers supply the tourism and food service sectors, they often have to wait months to get their payment. And this Guru Marketplace offers a real-time solution between demand and supply. It's being used by Massey Distribution in St. Lucia. It's even being used by the St. Lucia Hospitality and Tourism Association, so that the farmers are linked directly with their market, and it's working. And a group of young men and our St. Lucia office have developed this. Our Trinidad office has done some marvelous apps too, with the Cropper Foundation, as well as with the Ministry of Agriculture, providing online directories for the crops and nurseries and seedlings that are available, and for farmers to be able to link with their markets, especially SMEs, small and medium enterprises, even the micro ones, so that they have access to markets. We've done this in Guyana too, to the extent that 350 SMEs can now access markets online. And at the regional level, we have a CARICOM Agreed project using blockchain, as Keely mentioned. We've developed a CARI Agri-Trade app, where our farmers in countries between Latin America, especially Central America, and the Caribbean can have real-time market information in order to trade properly. For the tourism sector, we often hear that, oh, we can't supply and there is not enough quality and quantity and timeliness. With tools such as these, we can strengthen and consolidate our regional supply chains so that when tourism comes back in its fullness, then we can supply our Caribbean food to our tourists. And we also are developing an agri-extension app. It's being piloted in 9 countries. Our extension services also need to come on board, and this agri-extension app is being used, and we expect to pilot it right across the Caribbean. Next. At the policy level, how do we make this a reality? ICA is present in all 34 countries, and we land on the ground with our farmers, our stakeholders, the private sector, our SMEs. And all of these innovations and technologies that I've mentioned can become a reality with the appropriate institutional framework. And that framework must provide robust planning and policy making, and prioritize and provide support for research and development that is specific to the country, extension services, reformation, and protection of private sector investments. Because many times our private sector stakeholders see a lot of risk for agriculture and they're reluctant. So we must protect it. And all of this will create the enabling environment to capture those opportunities, build production and productivity of our agricultural supply chains across the Caribbean, reduce vulnerability, build resilience, and strengthen our food and nutrition security. Thank you, and I invite any questions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Harvey. I think there's a common thread coming through all of these presentations this morning, the whole role of partnership. And partnership seems to be a very important role, plays a very important role with everything that ICA does. So we now invite all of the panelists to respond to questions which we have received from the audience. And this is an international forum, so let's cross over to Maggie in Geneva studio to take a response from the floor.
Thank you very much, Winston. So I will open up the conversation to our audience here in Geneva. If there are any questions you might have for the panelists, please raise your hand and then I will come to you. Any questions? Any input? So I will take it to the online audience, Slido. And we have one question. How can small states compete against the large mega farms in continental countries? It is sometimes cheaper to import than grow. I think we can direct this to Mrs. Harvey. Is this a question you would like to talk about?
This is our existence. Small states trying to compete with large companies and imports that are often cheaper. Here in the supermarkets, you'd find imported carrots, for example, cheaper than our local production. And in that sense, policy decisions and the policy framework has a big role to play in protecting the local agriculture and in promoting what we grow and promoting also our food and nutrition security within the context of the tsunami of chronic non-communicable diseases that we face here in Barbados, in the Caribbean, and indeed across the world. When we eat what we grow and we grow what we eat, then we have a better handle on our traceability, on our food systems, on our biosecurity, and on the nutrition of our families, our rural communities, and our people at large. How do our small people compete? They compete with policy support, and they also compete with training, because they have to understand how to do production costing, how to understand their value chain and their supply chain, and how to access niche markets, because many times we can't produce to the volumes that large mass markets would require, but we have a lot of niche markets, and our tourism market is our best niche market. It is our backyard export market, and this is where we create the demand. This is where we create that engine that pulls the train for those niche exports, which we are able to compete with and which we have been very successful with in several commodities in international markets.
Maggie, I think Ms. Holder also wants to briefly respond to that question. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think when we talk about competition, we also have to understand what we mean. What are the factors that consumers are valuing now? Is it just price, or has that changed? Value is being redefined right around the world. And so there are other factors that are important to consumers. Quality is important, consistency, reliability. So there are other factors which, as small countries, we can compete on. Freshness. In fact, freshness is the single biggest driver of fresh produce in the world. And what we're seeing now is where we had a world 20 or 30 years ago that valued heavily processed foods. The world is now moving in the other direction. Following on from what Mrs. Harvey was talking about, we are seeing that because of the health and wellness issues right around the world and the high incidence of chronic non-communicable diseases, consumers are demanding that their food is fresher, and they're demanding more lightly processed goods as opposed to heavily processed goods. So we are seeing a demand for more fresh cut items, sliced and diced, cubed, pre-packed. In single packs, we've got household changes where we don't have large households anymore, but we have smaller households, one or two members in a family. And so this is changing what it is that consumers want. Now, if something is coming from a larger country, it's going to take a while to get to a small island. Certainly here in Barbados, it takes about 12 days for products to leave from the port of Miami to get to Barbados, which is where we import most of our produce from. This gives farmers and gives producers here an opportunity to compete because the quality at 12 days cannot be as fresh as coming right out of the ground and onto your plate within 24 hours. So this is a value proposition that we can take advantage of. There are other value propositions such as the flavor profile of particular foods. We know the foods that are created in our countries and how flavorful some of them are. In fact, in Barbados, we have thin soils which dry out foods out quickly, and as a result it tends to concentrate our aromatic flavors. So one of the things that we would see in when we used to export sweet potatoes to the UK, for example, and our Prime Minister always talks about it, she said there was a stand for sweet potatoes normally, and then there was a stand for Barbadian sweet potatoes. Why? Because it had a different flavor profile. So that means we can differentiate ourselves from homogeneous products because there's something unique about us. Look at Jamaican ginger, for example. There are other products within the Caribbean that are known to particular islands, that are known because of how they're produced, or what is specific to the country that gives it a more desirable appearance or flavor. And these are things that we can capitalize on. I think what we forget as small islands is that small is beautiful, and that's what Edward Schumacher said, and he was a Nobel laureate. The thing about it is once we appreciate our smallness, then we start to capitalize and take advantage of it, as opposed to competing on price. Competing on price is a very slippery slope. You never get out of that headlock, so to speak, once you're in that price loop. We want to offer consumers what they want, and we're saying to you, we're not going to give you cheap food, we're going to give you affordable food. We're going to give you food for value for money. That's what we're talking about.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Holder and Mrs. Harvey. We're now going to invite all of the panelists to offer some brief comments, some brief final comments. I'm going to first start with Mr. Petit. You have just 1 minute at maximum.
Thank you. Just to elaborate a bit about the matter, I think definitively competitiveness is not about price, but I would say how to organize your domestic market. And I would like to take the other example, which is rice in sub-Saharan Africa. Because a country like Uganda has a clear policy in a long-term perspective, because the market is organized, indeed you have investors in that countries which establish food industry itself. And then you can have your market developing, and you are not anymore competing with usual supplier from South Asia or Southeast Asia. So definitively, smart agriculture is a double way: efficiency at the farm level, but efficiency on the market. And it's very important to interlink these two approaches if we want to use the full benefit of this new technology. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you very much. From the FAO, one of the key for us is the partnerships that we create to drive business. And smallholders working together with the private sector, big private sector and government will allow to harness commodities that we have competitive advantage of in producing. And as mentioned earlier, we are not competing with the imported products, but more about finding those niche products that we can produce and work together along the chain in partnership, and not see ourselves just as producers, but marketers, linking ourselves to other aspects in the market. Key to doing that is being able to understand the market, knowing what it requires and meeting those demands, but doing it together. Working together, we can transform the value chains and market opportunities for smallholders. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Yes. So thanks for that, everyone. So my takeaway here is that the technologies that we have on hand can actually help address issues of scale and help increase efficiency. And as we know that issues of scale are something that's being facing. Okay. Uh, that we are facing in the Caribbean. So we do believe that with this opportunity, and if we tap this opportunity properly, then be able to somehow move forward with these challenges. Over. Thank you.
Now over to my studio audience. Ms. Holder, 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I would like to close by saying, first of all, as small island states, we have to appreciate that we are not going to be able to grow everything that we need. But what we can do is use smart agriculture to maximize the items that we can do here, increasing our productivity, increasing our yield and our competitiveness. We have to take advantage of the greater land masses within CARICOM, our neighbors, Guyana, Suriname, and Belize, to grow the items that are going to supplement what we are doing here in the region. And then, of course, the third strategy is going to look to diversify and build partnerships and relationships with those countries that have a surplus over demand. And in closing, and I know that we're following on for the next discussion as it relates to renewable energy, the other aspect of this nexus in smart agriculture is the relationship with renewable energy. Certainly, we see the importance of that for our sugar industry, which we are looking to redevelop to tie in the renewable energy component and the use of biomass to have a clean environment here in Barbados. But we also have solar PV, and we're tying that in with our sheep farming because there's a wonderful symbiosis between solar and sheep, and it's called solar grazing. And so that's the other area now where we're starting to see technologies explode with both smart agriculture on one end, but renewable energy on the next, and so that is creating that cohesion and that drive for the future.
Thank you. Mrs. Harvey, just 1 minute.
Just 1 minute. Just want to say that the ECA of today is an ECA of open doors. And we're committed to acting as a bridge, bringing cooperation right across the hemisphere to all of our member states. We're focusing on innovation and technology. And we see the sharing of best practices, knowledge management, success stories as key to all of this. Our center at CIMAG and all of the model centers that we hope to establish across the region will bring smart agriculture right here to our Caribbean, and we hope will make a very positive impact on our food and nutrition security.
Thank you, Mrs. Harvey. So thank you, and thanks to our audience for being part of our first session. I'm now going to throw over to my co-moderator, Maggie, over in Geneva. Okay. So I'm going to take over. This is a global forum, so we're going to do this as a team. Our discussions have continue this afternoon, and we thank you for staying with us until now. Our second panel will focus on a set of issues related to access to water and the various dimensions it involves beyond the provision of fresh water to populations. Access to water is an increasing challenge, and we have some experienced panelists to share their perspectives and respond to your questions. For now, we will take a 15-minute break, during which time you're invited to watch some entertaining and informative videos.